And then this is our special treat that we have once a year. What do we have here? So I'll let her introduce the program and our special guest. And again, many thanks. I hope you enjoy it and have a cookie and a good day.
It's really about Michael. I'm just here to interview him, but I just want to thank everybody for coming on a beautiful day because I don't know if I'd be here, but it's such a gorgeous day out there, so thank you so much. I started this program because I've always been curious about how people become artists, what motivates them, how do they get there? Are they born that way? Are they motivated by events or their upbringing or their schooling? Do they see art as a response to their life experiences? And can you hear me? Am I loud enough? Okay, thank you. And how their art informs their life and how their life informs their art. So I actually plagiarized from this person here, Deb Lathrop, who started a series several years ago, quite a few now.
Which I have to start back up.
Yeah, it's called Who We Are, and she found people in our community and interviewed them and got them on DVDs that you can check out from the library. And I thought that was a great idea, so I plagiarized it and emphasized artists. So I started in 2013 and asked local artists if they'd be willing to participate. And everyone I asked was so generous and said yes, they would do it. So I've interviewed Jonathan and Beth Evans, Ricky Timms, Judith Baker-Montano, Peggy Ziering, and Nicole Copel. She didn't want to be interviewed, but she did a great presentation on her life as a ceramicist. So that's how the program began. And today we have Michael Hoffer, and I'll introduce him in a moment. But first, let me just tell you what the format will be so you'll know what we're going to accomplish. I'm going to take about 15 minutes to interview Michael about his artistic life. He might talk a little about his dogs, I don't know. But he has wonderful dogs. So that'll be the first 15 or 20 minutes, and then he gets the last portion of the program, which can go up to an hour, and you're welcome to ask questions. I don't know if those will come after the presentation or during.
During, anytime.
Okay, great. So that's the format. And I just want to, before I start and introduce Michael, I want to make a simple dedication because any of you who know me know I love poetry. So I'm going to provide a short little poem about art. It's by Carmela Padilla in her book, The Work of Art. And it is, for all the world's artists in whose hands beauty speaks, in whose hearts history beats, in whose minds the ancestors meet, through whose eyes the whole world sees. So I think that's a nice way to characterize art. So this is Michael Hoffer, who now lives in Levita. And I first met Michael in yoga class. So I hope I'm not revealing anything I shouldn't. Okay.
No.
And he invited our class.
Half the people are in yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. He invited us up to his apartment at the Parkside after yoga on one Sunday, and we went up and we got to see his portfolio and some of his work in progress, which is some of it is here with the wooden boxes, and we were all taken aback. Again, you never know you're going to meet in Levita and what they do or what they've done. So that was really wonderful, and so I asked Michael if he'd be willing to give a presentation at the library, and he said yes. Again, generosity. Basic biographical information. Michael grew up in western Pennsylvania, and which Barb and Chip know about, and moved to Northern California and then to Santa Fe in 1990. And he became head of the woodworking department at Santa Fe Community College and was there 26 years, correct? Mm-hmm. 26 years. And then moved here in Levita as a retiree. But, like many of us, he's not fully retired. He is planning to open a gallery at the Parkside early summer. So keep your eyes out. Right now there are panels up. You can't really look in, but it's not a secret operation. He's not doing drug trafficking or anything. It's really going to be a wonderful woodworking gallery. So that's Michael Hoffer. And I'll start now with a few questions, okay? Here we go. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right. First off, can everybody hear?
Yes.
Okay,
So talk loud.
Okay.
okay. How old were you when you decided you wanted to be an artist, and how did that realization come to you?
That's a really good question because it's very vague to me. I always was involved doing things with my hands. I did a lot of art classes in high school and junior high and whatnot. And my real love was photography, my first love. And I had a 35mm camera and took pictures of everything all the time. I never really thought about, I'm actually uncomfortable with the word artist. And I mentioned this to you.
You can tell everybody why.
Oh, well, I don't know. I just do what I do, and I don't, if somebody wants to call it art, fine. And if somebody wants to call it craft or functional, making functional objects, that's fine. I think if you're doing whatever you do that expresses who you are, then it's art. So I keep it real simple.
Great definition.
I don't need to, like, after living around Santa Fe for almost 30 years, where 85% of the population are artists, it's kind of, I mean, it's ridiculous how many people are artists in that area. And so I'm kind of, you know, that word, we can use it, but I just do what I do, and it's who I am.
Gotcha.
It comes from very deep.
Great,
So there you go.
great. So the second question, how did you pick your medium, or did it pick you? And what do you like about working with wood? And feel free to address the audience, I'm just curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd say a little bit of both. My father did some woodworking, but not a lot. And I really wasn't interested. I hated junior high wood shop. It was like the biggest waste of time in my mind.
Bookshelves.
So, and at some point, I mean, I went away to college and got a bachelor's degree in liberal arts, and then moved to Northern California from Pittsburgh. And I was living in this house in San Francisco with a bunch of other people and maybe 3 or 4 guys. We started this business painting houses. And I was a really good painter. Insides, outsides, we painted. And one day I remember painting this bathroom with oil-based paint, and all the fumes were getting to me, and I thought, this sucks. I'm gonna learn how to build a house, not just paint. And so I investigated community colleges in Northern California. And at that time, this would be the late 70s, they were all tuition free.
Wow.
There was no tuition to go to community college. So I went and researched all these colleges, and I found one that had a really good carpentry, drafting, cabinet making program up on the North Coast in Humboldt County. And I went there for a year and a half to learn carpentry, building. And part of that is they had a big wood shop, and as like an elective, you could take wood shop and make anything you wanted, and that's what I really enjoyed. So carpentry was a way to make a living, but ultimately I wanted to make things in a wood shop with table saws, joiners, planers, all the machines, working at a workbench with tools. So that kind of, did that answer the question?
Yeah, and that was
Okay.
the next question, which is what kind of training in your...
After the community college thing to learn carpentry and all that, I did that for a few years in the Bay Area, and then I started going part-time to the California College of Arts and Crafts, which is in Oakland. Now it's called the California College of Art, but then it was called the Arts and Crafts, and they had a decent woodworking program, and it was less industrial arts and more artistic. Okay, it was an artistic bent on working with wood. So it opened up a whole new way of looking at it. because it was an art school. And I just was there part-time, just to take woodworking, and I kept my jobs as a carpenter doing, you know, building and remodeling.
So Mike, were you doing homes? I mean, were you able to work on building homes when you got out of the community college?
Yeah,
Wow. And that's what you did?
that's what, yeah, I worked for other people.
Yeah,
A
but
lot of remodels.
carpentry wasn't just doing cabinets, it was building
No,
houses.
I think a lot of people get carpentry and woodworking confused. Carpentry is building homes, building buildings. Woodworking is on a much smaller scale. Furniture, things like these boxes, which I'll talk about. And it's not out in the field building something, but it's working in a shop or a studio with much more precision and different kinds of materials, better woods. So yeah, I did that. I bounced around, and there was plenty of work, so I was able to work for contractors and take time off and take these classes that I wanted to take. And at some point along the line, somebody said, oh, you should, this was even before I went to the first community college for carpentry, they said, oh, you should read this book by James Krenov, who's a famous, I've never heard of the guy, but he was really well known, furniture maker and teacher. And he started, no, he didn't start, but there was a branch campus of a community college on the Mendocino coast, Northern California, about 4 hours north of the Bay Area. And that community college set up this program. He was living in Sweden at the time, and they set up this program to bring him to the United States, and he taught at this school just centered around him. And that was, I was there in 1985, 1986. And that's really where I got my training, my formal training in woodworking and designing and building furniture. It was a remote place. I was thinking about this just yesterday. It's kind of like Veta. It's kind of like this remote. Mendocino is like 4 hours from San Francisco, yet there's all this activity with art and a lot of woodworkers and a lot going on there. So that program lasted a year, and it was 6 days a week from 9 to 5, and it was very intense. 22 people in this kind of pressure cooker of you know, creating. And you learned one thing everybody does. These are hand planes. I'll pass them around. You make your own tools. So there's a piece of tape over the blades so you don't cut yourself. These are made of coca-cola.
Solid piece?
It's a secret. Cut it apart and put it back together so it looks like a solid piece of wood. But if you look carefully, you can see where it's cut apart.
You ready for your next question? You want to talk some more about it?
Well, I'm just saying that that's probably the biggest influence on me was going to that school. It was very, and I was there I think I was the 5th class, and it's still going.
Wow.
He died 10 years ago, and the class it's still well recognized as one of the best woodworking schools in the world.
Wow.
We had students from all over the world,
Wow.
Europe, New Zealand, Australia.
And his name again was?
James Krenov.
Krenov.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go to the next question.
Okay, yeah, you can keep prodding me.
Yeah, I'll keep prodding. What are the 3 things that have had the greatest influence on your art? Or in other words, what inspired you?
Well, first of all, when you start woodworking, at least most people start woodworking, they copy other people's work as a way of learning. If you like somebody's work, you'll do things similar. I never copied anything exactly, but I would make it my own by changing things. But it's like the one thing I learned, not one of many things I learned from Krenov, and maybe I'll talk about this more, at some point, is to trust your eye. He did not, he would make a little sketch on a napkin, like this big, of a piece of furniture he wanted to build. And then he would go start cutting wood.
Wow.
No measurements, no, it was very intuitive and very much trusting what he felt.
Wow.
And that's what I learned, I got that from him. So other furniture that I liked and kind of would copy at first, and then things in nature, forms and shapes and textures, color combinations that you see in nature. I walk around the lake every day, and that color of that lake changes every day, depending on what the sky's doing or what the sun's doing, or you know, the willows are really red and orange against this blue lake, and it changes all the time. And being observant of that. And then some of the pieces I've done, and I'll show them and talk about them, they're kind of not really biographical, or they tell a story about something something in my life that's important to me, and there's a little story about them, so they're more than just a piece of furniture.
Wonderful.
I'll show you.
Wonderful, that's great. What 3 things disrupt your creative process the most? And how do you
We're going to skip that question.
Oh, we're going to skip that? Do you want to skip? Well, and also people have negative inner critics. We all have that. And how do you overcome that? Or don't you have that issue?
Well, I'd say what interrupted me the most was having a full-time job as a teacher. It's very hard to make a living as a woodworker. The people who are successful either had a wife or a spouse, I should say, a spouse with a good job, they had money in the family, they were retired with a good pension. I ended up teaching and I started part-time, became full-time, and then, so I would squeeze my woodworking in when I had time, my creative things. And I was also constantly remodeling houses that I lived in. So,
Life interrupted you.
yeah. Okay?
Inner critic, you want to say anything about a negative inner critic? You don't have to. You can lie if you want.
No. I think I used to be much more critical than I am now.
Good.
I think I'm pretty much, I know who I am, I know what I want to do, and I know yeah, again, I trust myself. I trust my intuition, and that's what I learned from James Krenov, it's that.
Great. Any advice for individuals who are beginning their artistic life?
Don't be afraid.
Say that louder. So
Don't be afraid.
Thank you.
What do you got to lose? I tell my students that want to go out, the younger students that want to go out and be woodworkers and try to make a living, I say, never say no to a job. And you'll figure out, I remember, you're trying to survive. When I first got to New Mexico, I did all sorts of things, kitchen cabinets, libraries. I didn't just, make nice furniture and put it in galleries and make a living from that. That's not realistic. So I got a job, somebody building a house, they wanted me to do all the stairs, the railings, and I'd never done that. So I said, yeah, I can do that. So I went and, went to my buddies and say, hey, anybody ever built stairs? You know how to do that? And we figured it out, and it turned out really nice. But you have to be willing to put yourself out there. If you're afraid, you're not going to learn anything. And a lot of times I worked ended up being, $10 an hour or something, because it was way more work than I anticipated. But that's just part of the learning curve.
And if you don't value your work, who will? So you have to value it. What do you do to balance commercial success with your own aesthetic goals?
Well, I've done everything for all kinds of clients. And I try to do something that I like, something that I would want to own myself, but it's not necessarily what the client wants. So it's always a compromise, and I look at it as my job is to fulfill what their need is in an artful, creative way, and work with them. And then most recently, since I've worked full-time, that was my income, and I was able to be much more free with what I made, and not attach money or commercialism to it. And I'll talk about these little items over here maybe.
So that was the balance that you were able to strike.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for my
That's it,
portion.
huh?
You've done good, Michael. Thank you so much.
I can pass these around too if you don't have grubby, sticky fingers.
Hey, we got
No,
it.
river, I'll just come from the river.
Good patina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Just
this,
hold them up.
okay.
Yeah.
Basically, I refuse to get rid of like small pieces of wood that are really nice. And I had to figure out something to do with them. And so I'm making like 30 of these boxes. And basically what they are two-dimensional designs using different materials, and they're framed by something which is a functional box. Slides open, you can put little things in there. This one has bird's nest paper. This is an African porcupine quill and willow reed, very small, that's tied together with thread, wax linen thread. You can look at those. You can pass them around. So these are just experiments with wood and different materials. This one has paper in the middle, and it has the bark on the edge of the figured maple. This is maple. This is walnut. We'll start this over here. So that when I was working full time and remodeling a house, I would get to a certain, like summertime, I had a lot more free time. Or we had like 5 or 6 weeks over Christmas. So, and I would reward myself by when I finished remodeling the kitchen, then I would take a couple weeks off from that and work on these.
Nice.
And I have like 30 of them.
And they'll be in your gallery.
Yeah. And this one is a lot of paper. This is wax linen thread, and this is maple that has, this is western maple that's been dyed with aniline dye to make it blue. Aniline dye. So these were kind of just for fun. These were not with the intent of making money or being commercial. They were my reward to play. There was playtime. Instead of woodworking, it was wood play. Yeah, and it's, to mass produce the parts was kind of interesting, and then each one has a different lid and different woods. So, this guy, this is James Krenov, the guy I studied with. I just want to.
Swedish, you said?
Pardon me?
From Sweden, is that what you said?
He's actually born in Siberia.
Oh, so really?
He was born in Siberia, grew up in Seattle. His parents were missionaries, and they were. I guess he's Russian, actually, but they immigrated to Seattle, and as a young person, he had a lot of experience boat building, which involves a lot of curves and a lot of, it's not rectilinear or square, it has a lot of, Yes. Then after the World War II, he got a backpack and went to Europe and just bummed around Europe and ended up in Sweden, where he spent most of his adult life. And he learned, he worked for this Carl Malmström they still make, it's Swedish crafts furniture, very, very well known in Europe. And he worked there and developed his own ideas. And here again, in Sweden, his wife was a teacher. So in Sweden, if you're a teacher, they give you free housing. Okay? Democratic socialism. So he never would have survived if it wasn't for the fact that he and his wife and his family had a free place to live. He set up a shop in the basement and did his thing.
Once he was lured to California,
Yes?
did he ever leave?
No?
Because it sounds like he stayed there.
Yes.
Until he died.
Yes?
Wow, cool. Second question?
Yes?
Do you own any of his, anything
No,
that he made?
unfortunately.
Oh, I was like,
I have friends who I went to school with who bought the last piece that he made.
oh,
In fact, it was unfinished. And he became blind, and it was unfinished, so this guy, David Fink, and his wife bought it, and he said, David, I want you to finish it.
Wow.
What
So-
was it?
It's a cabinet on a stand. I don't have a picture of it. He did a lot of cabinets on stands. So this article actually came out while I was at the school there. I just wanted to read like the first 2 paragraphs of it, because I think this is what really got me interested in this person and in working with wood. One day in the early 1970s, while I was looking through a paperback on the crafts of modern Sweden, I came across a picture of a music stand made of lemon wood. Something about it stirring in the slight tension of the curves of the legs made me stop. The lines held something, a sense of memory. It was elusive, but in the form worked into the legs, I felt the craftsman had caught it. The wood seemed literally to be dreaming of the tree it used to be.
whoa.
This guy's a quick writer. Glenn Gordon wrote this article. Incredible as that feeling was, the music stand wore it with unassuming grace. Nothing about it was forced. The execution of the piece was clearly exquisite, but without pushing itself at you. Work like that, I thought, isn't born from the convulsions of ego alone. I looked for the name of the craftsman. The caption said James Krenov. It was the first time I had ever heard of him.
Wow.
And I don't have a good slide of this, but this cabinet, if you can, I'll pass this around. This is the kind of stuff he did, cabinets on stands, and this one is called walk around, because rather than being up against a wall, you can walk all the way around it and it reverses. So these, you open these doors and you'll see the inside, and from the back side, there are glass doors on the side, so you can access that. And what I really like about it is the use, it's walnut. Look at those legs. There's a tension and a curve to it that is not something generated from a computer. You know, he trusted his eye to get, there's a little bit, I'll pass it around so you can see it. It's just incredible the way he can get a shape and a form. So, pass that.
Master.
Yeah, and there's some books on the back table when we're done. You can look at some.
So, Michael, when you have a concept in your mind, how do you put it on paper? I mean, do you sketch it, or do you use CAD at all?
No.
Or
I
just call it sketch?
I use a sketchbook, and I'll go through like blank pages, no lines, and I'll go through many variations and page after page until I kind of hone in on it. And then I'll do like a basic scale drawing so I get a sense of proportion, but that's just a starting point.
No CAD?
No,
So,
I'm an old style paper and pencil.
so how do you choose your wood?
Oh, it depends on if it's something that I'm just doing for fun, or if it's something that a client wants. There's two
Or
different
just
things.
For something that you were doing for yourself, and how do you?
Uh,
I'm sure it depends on what you're making, but.
No, yeah, it's basically wood. It can be like maple is very light, walnut and cherry or darker. Some woods have a lot of grain texture to them, so it depends what I'm looking for. What do I want to express? If it's something more heavy and rustic, maybe I'd use oak or ash that has an open grain and is more bold. If it's something really more delicate, I might use a closed grain wood that can be polished very smoothly. Does that answer? Maybe.
Got pictures?
We could just look at pictures. So, hit the first one, Tony. That's.
Should we turn the
Oh
lights
yeah, we
off?
were going to turn the lights off. Or down.
These,
Are you finding it hard to get woods?
Not really. I have so much wood that I've collected. I don't even buy wood anymore, hardly. Let's go back to the one that said new folder. Yeah. And you can open both of those. Okay, so in nature, there's all kinds of interesting curves and shapes. Okay, and this has a lot of texture to it. So by just looking at stuff like that, it's like, well, maybe I wouldn't make a leg that is like that, but that's an influence. And then the next picture, an animal tusk. And I guess let's go to the ones that say JPEGs for the website, that one. And we'll just start at the beginning.
these are yours?
Yes, these are mine. And this is a piece, I think Krenov's philosophy and his way of working is something I latched onto, but not necessarily his style. So I think we have a similar aesthetic, but not the same style. A lot of the things I do, he would never do, and people who are Krenovian, which is a word, an adjective, would never color wood. Well, this is black aniline dye on ash, and it has a lot of texture to it. And I've made this piece maybe 3 or 4 times. It's been very successful. It's one of the few things I've made over and over again and put in a gallery, and they're always sold. Little feet on it are holly, pure white, so the contrast. So I got that idea of that curve just from looking, the animal tusks have this general curve to them. Let's see,
Michael?
Yes, any questions? Yes, please ask.
Is that a table?
That's a hall table.
It's a hall table.
Yeah, so it's maybe...
Because I was gonna say, it's hard to see if it's a bench or a table, but I was like, I would never sit on that, it looks so delicate.
Yeah,
So it's a table?
Yeah, it's like maybe
Got it.
14 wide and yay.
Okay.
And I think these are organized by, they're by what they are. So first there's all these tables. This was similar but different in that I just played with black and white, and it's a hall table. At one point I had one client for almost an entire year who built a big house in Santa Fe, and somebody connected me with him, and I built like every piece of furniture in the house for him. It was a great gig for a year while it lasted. So I just made this, and I just brought it over to his house one day, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'll buy that. It'll go right here." So, that's ash, and the top is bleached bird's eye maple. So I wanted it to be really white.
Can you mention dye?
Aniline dye.
Yeah, you use dyes as opposed to stains, or you just...
Yeah, I like dyes
Yeah.
because you can really get color.
Yeah.
Like if I want something to be blue or red or green or yellow, I can dye it with aniline dye, and you see the grain. It's actually, dyes are molecular, whereas stains are like pigments are floating in a solvent, and they catch in the grain. And so that's the difference. So this gives a much more even.
Wow, I didn't know that, they
Yeah.
catch in the grain.
Yeah, that's why you stay. Staining is done like in factory furniture, where they just pick any old board, and they're making furniture in a factory, and they want it all to look the same. And all these boards came from different trees, so by staining it, you could make it look uniform. And one of the big things is that I do is carefully selecting the wood before I do anything. This is a coffee table in walnut, and those light streaks are the sapwood out next to the bark. So there's actually 4 pieces of wood across there, so they're joined at that sapwood, and the end pieces have a little bit of that sapwood too. This is I thought it was a coffee table, but people keep calling it a bench, so it's either or. And those are hair pipe, which is Native American. I found them in a catalog of Native American crafts, like for those breastplates, and they're actually come in different sizes and different lengths. And so I thought it was a coffee table, but you can, I still have it, so it'll be in the gallery. So if you want a bench or a coffee table.
And the wood is?
Oh, the wood is called the dossier, and it comes from Cameroon in Africa. It's very rare wood. It was one of Krenov's favorite woods, so I managed to get some. It's pretty hard to find now.
Is that white undulating?
Yeah, it was another picture.
Okay.
Can you just hit the forward instead of going back? Does that work? We should go to the next. There you go.
Oh, wow.
There's close-up detail. It has a wave pattern
Yeah.
going through it, and the spacing of them, it's close. They're closer, and then they spread out, so they're further apart. So it's kind of
Is that going into the wood, or is it just?
there's a bunch of holes.
Okay. It goes in.
Yeah, they're actually the glue up of this thing. I had to I had a million holes, and I had to bring it together and fit every one of those things before the glue dried.
And I've seen these things, but what are they? I've seen the breastplate.
It's called hair pipe.
Hair
Haircut.
Hair pipe is what
It's made out of bone.
it's bone. They're bone.
Oh, okay.
American Indian.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
it's bone.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it is. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what else. Oh, this is boy, the color's kind of off, but this is a writing desk and chair that I made for a woman who's a poet, actually, and it's European pearwood. So and it has a rosewood inlay going around. That you can see those little lines around there. She saw my work at a show and picked up my card, and like 3 years later called me. And so I did the desk for her, and then for a Christmas present, her husband bought the chair, commissioned the chair, so she had a matching chair to go with it. And that's pearwood it's kind of a pink, fleshy, really nice material to work with, and the color's kind of off on this slide, I guess. This was part of what I did for the gentleman who had this house built up on Bishop's Lodge. I did a mahogany dining table with 8 chairs.
Wow.
And so the theme of it is, if I used copper banding here and put a patina on it here and at the back of the chair, so that these 3 pieces were splaying out and kind of held together with the copper. And so it's not really doing anything. I mean, they're mortise and tenon into the legs or into the base and everything, but it's more of a design detail. So it's holding those together and they're splaying out. And I thought when the guy took the picture, I thought it was interesting. He caught those dried flowers in the window.
Yes, doing the same petition.
Okay. And there's 2 of the chairs. So those were some of the first chairs I ever did.
Leather upholstery, did somebody?
Leather, yeah.
You did that too?
I had someone do it.
Ah.
I've tried it, and it's like, if you really want a good upholstery job, you take it to somebody who's a professional. I mean, I can do it, but I'd rather not. Okay. And so this was, I had like parts for like 2 extra chairs. And like 10 years after this, I got a offer to be in a show of chairs at the International Museum of Folk Art in Santa Fe, up on the hill. And I was teaching full time, and it was like I had like 4 months to make something for this opportunity. I had to be in the museum. So I took one of those, I took some of the parts I had and reconfigured them and changed the angles and added the feet and, but it's basically the mahogany part. The dark part is mahogany, the other parts are figured maple. The mahogany was basically from those original chairs that you just saw, but all the joinery was done, the mortise and tenons and everything, and I just reshaped it and made a different chair. And I still have parts for another chair floating around. So, and that's the rear view, which is kind of dim. But that was professionally upholstered. And one of my students she was into interior design, and she said, "Oh, let me go find some fabric for you." And I said, sure, anytime. And I think she ordered this from England, but it was the perfect color to match the maple and the mahogany. So, and then I had a professional guy do it. So I still have that, and I have a writing desk that I started that goes with this. And maybe next winter I'll complete that. This is a jewelry cabinet, well, it started as a jewelry cabinet for some clients, and I gave them like 6 different little doodles of designs, and the one they picked is not the one I like. This is the one I like. So I made this at the same time. And this is mahogany that's been dyed red with aniline dye again. And there's those hair pipes for the handles. And then the next slide shows it open.
And Michael, how long to make that?
Forever. Not really, a lot of time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean like months, a year?
Yeah, months.
A month.
Months, I would say.
Thanks.
Bird's eye maple for the drawers, and I actually use this. I still have, and I use it for rocks and pine cones and things I pick up. So it's not for jewelry. I don't even own any jewelry, but
How tall is it?
maybe like here.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's about maybe like a foot square, more or less, and about maybe that high.
Whoops.
You can write it.
We have lumber next.
There we go. These were nightstands. These were for the guy who I did beds and dining tables and everything for.
What a gig.
Walnut and holly. He wanted a lip so that his pencil wouldn't roll off the back of it.
Oh,
Back of
cool.
the- So.
What are the handles made out of?
Again, holly. Yeah, which is pure white. It's really nice stuff. This is Douglas fir, and the handles are mahogany. Douglas fir is a building wood, but if you find the old growth, real tight grained, it's beautiful straight grained material. And so this is my some of my arts and crafts kind of stuff, where there's exposed tenons coming through on the front of the legs. There's this subtle little arch in the doors, the tops of the drawers.
How big is this, Michael?
It's probably maybe this wide and like this long. It's a sideboard that would go in a dining room. And
could you perhaps describe what arts and crafts means for the audience who may not be familiar with that movement? It's an American and English design movement.
Right. And it was kind of a reaction to the Industrial Revolution where I guess William Morris might have been the main guy behind it. And How many people have ever heard the arts and crafts movement? Yeah. And it was about bringing back craftsmanship and hands-on work to rather than just mass-producing stuff.
And houses were built to reflect that design movement where all the furniture and all the house was complementary.
Yes.
Arts and crafts houses were
Yeah.
very popular.
Yeah. If the Green and Green were two architects, and they also, one of them designed and built furniture. Well, he actually designed it, he really didn't build it. But there's a house in Pasadena, the Gamble House, for, Procter and Gamble, and the whole thing is like one massive piece of furniture. It's like the woodwork, I mean, copper downspouts, and it's pretty incredible. And you can go and tour this place. It's like considered the highest form of the arts and crafts because it was there's a lot of Asian influence to it. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And it's kind of a little distorted view, but the sides are framed. Frame and panel is how you make these, a frame. This is how you make a door. The frame is glued together, but the panel floats because wood expands and contracts with humidity. So if you glue the panel in, it will crack apart, like Susan's door that you gave me to repair, because it was glued.
Right.
And so frame and panel is like a basic construction method. And a lot of times if you build something solid, you have to realize you can't have it conflicting with other parts of the furniture that are going to expand and contract in another direction. Everything has to move together. So this is a mahogany sideboard that has solid sides that are fatter at the bottom and they're tapered up in a curve, and that's bird's eye maple panels in there, and that was for a client. I think the pools are ebony, and that's probably about the same size as the previous one. So a lot of these were commissions that I did. A lot of it was in New Mexico. I don't really think there's anything in here from California days. So this was, I did a series of cabinets that were, this is what I'm talking about. They're kind of not necessarily, what's the word I'm looking for? Not biographical, but
Stories.
it tells a story. Where's a word for that?
Narrative.
Sorry?
Narrative.
Thank you, that's the word. Okay, so the skull was something I found hiking, and I wanted to make a cabinet that this hangs on the wall. It's maybe this big. And it was just about a way of displaying this skull, but it was functional. The wings that are on the top and the bottom and come down the sides are something that's called a tapered bent lamination. So if you wanted to make a curve in a piece of wood like this shape, and you just cut it out of a solid piece of wood, at some point, if your grain is running this way, you're going to have short grain here and here, and it's going to want to break. What you do is you take wood to the bandsaw, and you rip it in thin pieces, and then you glue it around the form, and then you have the grain following the shape. Pass that around. You can see from the end that it's separate pieces. So you build a form out of particle board or something, and you glue it, and then the glue holds those thin pieces to that shape.
So did you bend them?
Yes, I bent them around the form. And that was actually tapered, so oftentimes, like those are tapered, you can send them through a planer on a jig so that it makes a tapered piece. And then when you glue them up, you get that. I mean, that's just a rough piece, but that could be shaped into about anything.
And then you have to clamp it, I suspect.
Oh yeah, you clamp it, and it's the glue. When the glue dries, that's what holds it together.
Right.
It won't bounce back to being straight again.
How large of a piece can you
pretty big.
Can you?
Yeah.
Pretty big size.
Yeah, especially if you have a vacuum press, which I don't have, but we had one at the school. It's a big thing that basically it's a big plastic bag, sucks the air out, and you're using atmosphere as your clamp. The weight of the atmosphere is how much per square inch? It's something at sea level at 7,000 feet, it's different. But it's plenty of pressure to push it down.
That's what I was gonna ask you, does it make a difference at elevation if you do it?
Yeah, you have to crank it up a little bit if you're at a higher
So is
elevation.
that how they do the bows of ships?
I'm not sure about shipbuilding. I don't know. I don't know, though I'd take an awfully big vacuum press to do that.
What's the dark, is that wood, the dark
Well,
under the skull?
yeah, it's painted.
Oh, okay.
The next slide, it opens.
Oh, cool.
So there's shelves in there, and then that panel lifts off and there's shelves in there. So part of these is that the inside and the outside are not totally distinct. You can see part of the inside from the outside, and they all have some other compartment inside. So that lifts off, and it's just a place to put stuff. But it's mostly about, I'm starting to get, at this point, starting to get much more sculptural.
Well, the shape on the panel replicates the skull.
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
The green.
Yeah.
The green. Yeah, in regard to the shipbuilding, I was living in Portugal one year when I was living there, and they had the estaleiros, which were the shipbuilders down by the shore, and they were building replicas of the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria using the old methods. And what they would do is they would go into the oak forests, and they would find limbs that they could use, and they might bend them a little bit,
Yes.
but it was a natural wood. And then up in the Basque Country, where they pollard beech trees, and they've been doing it for centuries, they would train the limbs, okay, to be used as the ribs of ships or smaller vessels, and that's where they came from.
It's like the youth prayer trees.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, they guided it as it was growing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you have to remember that wood has all its strength. If you think of wood as a bundle of straws, okay, and it has strength, and when you cut those short, they want to break. So by bending something around the form like this, you keep the strength of the wood in that curve. You'll see some incredible bent lamination furniture when I open the gallery that Larry and Nancy Beakley, who live on the high road to Taos, if you know where that would be, up in the mountains, they have a coffee table they're going to bring, and it's like a pretzel of this wood going around, and it's got a glass top. It's pretty cool. So there's a lot of advanced technique and stuff that you get into. This is, I call this a cholla cabinet because there's cholla sticks there. And the wood in the front doors is sycamore. So you get all that little flecking and all that stuff in there. And then the next slide shows it open.
Is sycamore hard or soft?
Hard.
Hard.
These are mostly all hardwood. And then again, that panel that has all the cholla sticks, there's a lot of cholla down in New Mexico and whatnot. So that lifts off and there's places to put things. So these hang on the wall, and they're all about maybe 30 inches tall.
Do you still have these?
This one, yeah, I still have. And this was in the state, they had a exhibit last year at this time in the state capitol of the faculty from the art department of the community college. And this was in that, and I still have it in the packaging that they returned it. So that will be in the gallery too. I haven't sold out.
Did you name these pieces, Michael?
Yeah, just called cholla cabinet. The other one was the skull cabinet.
Wow, so
No, this was Harry.
See ya.
Okay. Let's try another one. This one does have a name, Sea of Cortez.
Ah.
And one spring break, we went to San Carlos, Mexico. And I was on the beach there, and I kept finding these turquoise stones. So I kept picking them up, putting them in my pocket. And this is where they ended up. This is cherry. And then when you open it, there's a little vessel. If you,
I love that.
okay? So that's, the inside is figured maple that has been dyed blue-green, so it's kind of like the ocean, and I don't know, you can interpret this any way you want. You know, are they coming down into that vessel? That's something I turned on the lathe. Or are they coming out of it? I mean, it was just about the sea and the experience of being on the beach and finding these. So your inspiration can come from anywhere if you're open to it.
How big is that?
Pardon me?
How big?
It's maybe, yeah, they're all about this tall, and they're that wide, and they hang on the wall.
You still have this one?
No, that one's sold. That one's sold.
Wow.
Oh, we missed, go back one. Let's see. There. This is white oak. This was called homage to Suzuki Roshi, who was a Zen Buddhist master who came to the U.S. and started the San Francisco Zen Center in Tassajara, which is a monastery down in California. So this was something I was involved in my early 20s when I moved to San Francisco. Again, the top is bent lamination to get that curve, and the joinery, the sides are joined to the top and bottom with dovetails, hand-cut dovetails. And I found those discs at the Tsuki flea market, which is no longer there. Or no, it is still there.
Yeah, it's different.
It's bigger. It's up by the opera. And again, you can see part of the inside from the outside. And then when it opens, it's just a place for, I still have that, and that's not for sale. That's a keeper. This has a lot of personal meaning for me.
What are the discs made of?
Turquoise.
Oh,
They're
okay.
rocks, but there's turquoise in them, but they're not pure turquoise. So, and that little panel lifts off. So again, it's like, you know, a compartment within a compartment. Cherry, these are like room divider screens with wild bamboo paper in there. And when I put it together and put the paper in there, and it looked like leaves blowing from the window. It has all this movement, all this wind. So, and then then I started doing sculpture. After I retired, I still worked at the community college teaching one class every semester, maybe for 3 or 4 years, and I started doing what I always said I would do, is like take other classes when I'm not so busy. So I got into the sculpture department and did a lot of wood sculpture. So this is maybe that long and that tall, and it sits there. Spalted maple. Spalting is wood begins to rot, and it gets the fungus makes all these little black lines in it, and then if you can get it before it gets soft and punky, you'll have these black lines, but it's totally hard, just like maple. And then the inside is dyed maple, so it's kind of splitting open, and there's this hard, glossy inside to it. That was another wood sculpture, maple with milk paint, and those are all burned, like a little, these little burning tools that make all these burns, and so that took hours, but it was fun. It was really fun. I think I just numbered them. Sculpture number 002. I don't know. And that's another one, mahogany. Down in the bottom of it is gold leaf, and again, I'm using those hair pipe again, ebony. So I kind of approached sculpture like I did furniture, like putting things together, like joining different elements and putting them together, as opposed to a lot of sculpture and a lot of objects that I'll have in the gallery are turned wood. You turn it on a lathe, so think of it this way. In turning, you start with a chunk of wood and you take material away to create a shape or an object, whereas in furniture making, you mill pieces of wood and you join them together with joinery. So it's a rather than one's a constructive process and the other one is eliminating material to create your form. So that's two really different parts of woodworking. And my buddy Jim has a lathe, so I'm going to get back into turning. I have a bunch of box elder that came out of the river cleanup, and it's this creamy white material with red and pink streaks through it. So I would like to do some bowls, maybe over the winter or something, and then sell them with the proceeds going to the Veta trails. Because it came, you can have a bowl or something that came out of the river cleanup. We'll see. We'll see if I get to that. But that's now these are some boxes. That's a music box, pear wood and walnut. So you open it, there's a music. I tried this years and years ago in California to make music boxes, and I just never had it together how to market them, which is usually the problem most artists have. That's way before I could do that. So I still have that, and I made a few of those. And then
You just buy the music workings?
yeah,
And insert it in?
yeah, you turn the key and
Yeah.
it plays a Mozart tune. I mean, the works inside were like, this was the late 80s, and it was $300.
Where
So
do
it's-
those come from?
Someplace in Europe.
Yeah,
I can't even remember this long ago, how long ago that
yeah.
I got that.
Switzerland's really well known.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe
You're doing Hobby Lobby now.
I'm sure. It has three parts to it. I mean, it has three different movements to the tune, to the Mozart. It's not just one, it plays three different. Anyway, that's one of the things that's still boxed up somewhere. This is I made for a friend. It's just a simple box out of Western maple, and the top is a burl, veneered burl. And then these were the prototypes for these boxes that I'm doing now. Paper. I had a friend that does this paste paper that is, she puts ink, she does them wet and then she combs it and gets all these patterns and colors. And then when it dries out, then I just use adhesive to put it to some particle board, so that becomes the lid. And the other one is obviously a wooden lid. So I made 4 of these just to try out my idea, and I figured out some ways of making them easier and quicker and better when I made 30. But that's always, before you jump into something where you're going to make that many, you want to try a smaller run to see how your process goes. So, no, I think that one is here, isn't it? Yeah, that's cherry and maple and ebony on paper. And I think that's mahogany, and the top is a negre, and the wood is actually maple.
Tiger maple?
Yeah, no, it's just regular maple, but it's when you. Well, I could go into this whole thing about wood, but we're running out of time anyway. But the way you cut the piece of wood depends on what pattern you get, and you can get straight lines and little flecks if you quarter saw it. That's a whole other story about how to do that. That's maple in the middle, and it's been dyed blue-green. And that's a negre. I don't use too many tropical woods. Mostly I use domestic hardwoods. And I think that could be the end of Oh, yeah, we're back to the beginning. So, yes, questions?
I have a question that I might have missed the answer to, but what brought you to La Veta? How did you find us?
I came through here like 23 years ago. And I was doing the Cherry Creek Arts Festival in Denver, and on the way back we came through La Veta. And I was here for an afternoon, and I was like, this is a cool place. And then I went back to northern New Mexico and had a life for another 20-some years. And then 5 years ago, I came up here to go to Gardner to buy some wood for a commission.
Yeah.
Collector's specialty woods. Because people that they had really been promoting, and it's like, oh, let's go check this out. And all my students have been driving up here to buy special wood that you can't buy anywhere in New Mexico. So I came in and I hung out here. I was camping up in the mountains, and I hung out for a day, and I just walked around and talked to a realtor. And I think the big thing, I was walking down the street, and there was this, I don't remember what street, some guy was planting flowers. And we just stopped and talked for like an hour and a half about whatever. And I thought, I'm here. I'm gonna move. It took me 5 years due to family issues, health issues, remodeling the house, waiting to retire, et cetera, but here I am. And happy to be here.
Great.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Jim.
Yeah, Michael, you grew up in an environment that was dominated by wood, trees.
Yes.
Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods,
Penn's Woods.
literal interpretation. Do you have a sense of how much that influenced your interest in working with wood? Being wood is always in your view shed, so to speak, as a kid.
I never thought about that, but I never got into woodworking until I was in my early to mid-20s. Like I said, junior high wood shop was a total bust for me. But I certainly know that all the good wood comes from back east in the Midwest. You just can't, it's really hard to find wood out west until you get to the West Coast. There's a huge part of the country where it's mostly conifers. So I spent a lot of time in the woods hiking and just being outdoors. So I was in the forest a lot as a young person. Would go fishing up in north central Pennsylvania. That's the biggest. I read it's the biggest forest between New York and Chicago. Runs across southern New York State and northern Pennsylvania. It's just forested. It's a mixed hardwood and softwood forest. Here, if you find 3 species of trees together, it's amazing. Back there, you get 20. So, anything else? Okay, I'm gonna call it a day.
When do you open? Yeah.
Maybe if we're lucky, mid-May, but I would say the second half of May. And what I'm doing, this is how my life has worked. I just stumble into the greatest things. Okay, I moved to Santa Fe not knowing a soul, and ended up teaching 26 years at the community college in the job of a lifetime. The way I look at it, I really enjoyed it. I bought some land here over on Cherry and Cascade, and I was coming through town. I went to the bakery. I'm walking past the Parkside. I hear noise in there. I just walk in and start talking to Brent, and before you know it, I'm renting the upstairs apartment.
That's the way it works.
That's the way it works. And now we're trying to figure out what to do with the downstairs and figure out. We're going to have a gallery, and it's not just my work. I have all these folks I know from Santa Fe that were colleagues of mine. I probably have at least eight or 10 people who taught. They're really good. I have a lot of young students who want to try to get into this and show their work and sell it. Because nobody ever taught me how to make a dime doing this. I've figured it out the hard way. So I feel like this is an extension of my teaching career, is to help promote. And then one of my former students from 10, 12 years ago moved to Denver, and he teaches at Red Rocks Community College part-time, and they have an incredible woodworking program up there. So I'm in touch with those folks, trying to get their students and their faculty to participate, because we're kind of halfway between Denver and Santa Fe. We'll see what happens. It's an adventure. I've never done this. I don't know the first thing about running a gallery, but I got a lot of help from the folks next door and from people around, so it's an adventure.
Good.
So.
Well, I just want to say, Michael, thank you so much, and aren't we lucky we get another wonderful person? Thank you all for coming. It's always delightful to do programs for the library and have people come and be interested. So thank you so much, and we'll see you at the Parkside Gallery.
July 20th is the grand opening.
Oh, okay.
July 20th, it's a Saturday.
Okay.
Catered by Rice Avenue Bakery. So I'm working it together with Ed and Antonio. We're gonna have there's a bunch of books on the back table if you're interested in what people are doing with wood nowadays. So those books will blow your mind.
We've been working on them.